Every Marine swears to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They pledge their lives to uphold the sacred motto Semper Fidelis, always faithful, representing the highest ideals of military honor and sacrifice. This oath represents society's trust in America's most elite fighting force, trained to be the first to fight and the last to retreat. Military service attracts individuals seeking honor, purpose, and the elite status that comes with earning the title Marine. However, it can also appeal to those seeking power, control, and authority through violence against others. The question that haunts Marine leadership: does military service create killers, or does it attract individuals already predisposed to violence who then use their training to enhance their criminal capabilities? Welcome to Savage Case Files, where we expose the most shocking betrayals, brutal crimes, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Today's episode: 6 U.S. Marines who turned military discipline into torture chambers and murder sprees that terrorized America for decades. Subscribe now to never miss our investigations into the darkest betrayals of military honor. The Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis, represents unwavering loyalty and honor to country and fellow citizens. These men took the Marine oath, then spent decades taking innocent lives with military efficiency. From California torture compounds to Cleveland's most vulnerable neighborhoods, they turned service into slaughter. 6 Marine veterans became serial killers, with over 50 confirmed victims across multiple states and decades. Their killing sprees spanned 3 decades of systematic terror that left communities devastated. Marine training that should have protected Americans was used to hunt them with deadly effectiveness. From California to Ohio to Indiana, no region was safe from their reach. Multi-state killing sprees were enabled by Marine mobility and combat training that gave these predators unprecedented access to victims. These men used their military skills to spread death across the nation while exploiting the trust that comes with wearing the uniform. Women, families, vulnerable individuals all became targets for Marine-trained predators who systematically exploited society's most defenseless populations. Society's most vulnerable people who trusted the wrong men in uniform paid the ultimate price. Over 50 confirmed deaths, with suspected totals reaching much higher when considering unsolved cases. Marine discipline was applied to systematic torture, rape, and killing that shocked even experienced investigators. Combat training was perverted into civilian hunting and execution methods that demonstrated military influence. Torture compounds and killing sprees spanning decades showed how military training enhanced criminal capabilities. Lake NG torture murders, Cleveland Strangler, multi-state killing sprees, each case represents years of terror and dozens of victims. Each name became synonymous with Marine-trained brutality that terrorized entire regions. Marine-trained killers who shocked America with their systematic approach to civilian murder. From 1983 to 2014, these men killed with Marine-trained impunity while maintaining connections to military service. 3 decades of murder while carrying the credentials and training of America's elite fighting force. How did the Marines miss the monsters in their ranks who would use their training for mass murder? Death row, suicide, life sentences, various forms of justice were eventually served to these Marine-trained killers. Some died before facing full consequences for their crimes. Others continued to await execution decades later. The question remains: how many more victims could there have been if they hadn't been caught? What role did Marine service play in creating these systematic killers who terrorized multiple states? Did combat training enhance their ability to torture and murder civilians with military efficiency? The uncomfortable questions about military screening and oversight that the Marine Corps still faces today. Families were destroyed by men who were supposed to defend them from harm and protect American communities. Communities lived in terror for decades, while Marine-trained predators operated with military-enhanced methods. The lasting trauma of betrayal by those sworn to protect American citizens from exactly these kinds of threats. Multi-jurisdictional cases were complicated by Marine mobility that allowed killers to operate across state lines with ease. Decades-long investigations were hampered by military-enhanced criminal methods that made these killers particularly elusive. Marine combat training made these killers more dangerous and harder to catch than typical predators. 6 cases that expose how Marine service can mask the most dangerous predators in American society. From decorated Marines to death row and suicide, these men represent the ultimate betrayal of military values. We'll examine how these men perverted their military training for mass murder and systematic torture. 6 Marines, over 50 victims. Decades of terror that shocked America and changed how we view military service. Case by case, we'll reveal how Marine servicemen became the nation's most feared killers. Case 1. Leonard Lake. Leonard Lake represented one of the most horrific examples of how Marine combat training could be perverted for systematic civilian torture and murder. Born in 1945, Lake served as a Marine during the Vietnam War, where he developed combat skills and tactical thinking that would later be applied to creating America's most organized torture operation. His fellow Marines never suspected that beneath his military discipline lay violent fantasies that service had temporarily contained. Lake's Marine service during Vietnam provided him with combat experience and systematic approaches to violence that he would later apply to helpless civilian targets. His military training in tactical operations, field logistics, and operational security became the foundation for establishing one of the most methodical torture compounds in American criminal history. The discipline and organizational skills that made him an effective Marine would be perverted into tools for systematic murder. Following his discharge from the Marines, Lake struggled to adapt to civilian life while harboring increasingly violent fantasies about controlling and torturing women. His military background provided him with the tactical knowledge and systematic thinking necessary to turn these fantasies into reality. The transition from legitimate military service to criminal predator showed how combat training could be misapplied to civilian targets. In 1983, Lake established his remote compound in Calaveras County, California, where he would systematically torture and murder multiple victims over the next 2 years. His isolated location provided the perfect base for military-style operations against civilian targets, showing clear influence from Marine training in establishing secure operational bases for extended missions. The compound demonstrated how military site selection and security principles could be applied to criminal enterprise. Lake developed an elaborate fantasy called Operation Miranda, which involved kidnapping women to serve as sex slaves in a post-apocalyptic scenario he believed was coming. His Marine tactical planning was applied to kidnapping and enslaving civilians, showing how military logistics and operational planning could be perverted for the most evil purposes. The systematic nature of his plan demonstrated military influence in long-term strategic thinking. The compound featured an underground bunker equipped with restraints, torture devices, and recording equipment that showed clear military influence in construction and operational design. Lake's Marine engineering knowledge was used to build a torture chamber capable of holding multiple victims for extended periods of systematic abuse. His facility demonstrated how military construction and security knowledge could be applied to creating sustainable torture operations. Lake's victim selection process showed systematic thinking learned through Marine service, as he targeted individuals and families based on vulnerability and isolation from potential rescue. His military training in intelligence gathering and target assessment was applied to identifying perfect victims for his torture compound. Each selection demonstrated the methodical approach that characterized his Marine service. The systematic torture methods employed by Lake showed clear influence from Marine combat training and interrogation techniques learned during his Vietnam service. Military-style questioning and physical abuse were applied to helpless civilians for his sadistic pleasure and control. His approach demonstrated how legitimate combat training could be perverted into systematic civilian torture and sexual assault. Lake documented his crimes with videotapes that showed his systematic approach to torture and murder, applying Marine training in documentation and record-keeping to preserving evidence of his systematic crimes. His recordings provided horrific evidence of how military organizational skills had been perverted for civilian torture and murder. The systematic documentation showed continued application of military operational procedures to criminal activity. Bodies were systematically disposed of through burning, burial, and chemical dissolution to eliminate evidence of his crimes and maintain operational security. Lake's Marine training in field operations and logistics was applied to evidence destruction on a massive scale. His systematic approach to body disposal showed military influence in operational security and evidence elimination procedures. The investigation into Lake's compound began when missing persons reports led police to examine his remote Calaveras County location in 1985. Authorities discovered evidence of systematic torture and murder that shocked even experienced investigators familiar with violent crime. The scope of Marine-trained evil slowly became apparent as investigators uncovered the full extent of his torture operation. Leonard Lake was arrested on weapons charges during the initial investigation, but he took a cyanide pill while in police custody, choosing suicide over facing justice for his systematic crimes. The Marine veteran's death left investigators with limited information about the full scope of his torture operation and potential additional victims. His suicide denied victims' families the opportunity to see him face full accountability for his systematic torture and murder. Lake's death by suicide represented the final act of a Marine who had completely betrayed his oath to protect American citizens. His systematic torture operation showed how military training could be perverted for the most evil purposes when placed in the hands of someone with violent criminal tendencies. The case highlighted the need for better psychological screening and ongoing monitoring of military personnel. The Leonard Lake case represents one of the most horrific examples of how Marine combat training can be systematically applied to civilian torture and murder. His military background provided organizational skills and tactical knowledge that made him an exceptionally dangerous and methodical killer. The case changed how law enforcement approaches investigations of remote compounds and highlighted the potential dangers of military-trained criminals operating against civilian populations. Case 2. Charles Ng. Charles Ng brought his own Marine training to the most horrific torture partnership in American criminal history, combining his military background with Leonard Lake's Vietnam experience to create an exceptionally dangerous criminal operation. Born in 1960, Ng served in the U.S. Marines before being discharged for theft, showing early criminal tendencies while retaining the military training that would enhance his ability to commit systematic crimes against civilians. Ng's Marine service provided him with weapons training, tactical operations knowledge, and systematic approaches to violence that would prove invaluable in his criminal partnership with Lake. His military background in logistics and operational planning complemented Lake's Vietnam experience, creating a combination of Marine-trained skills that made their torture compound exceptionally organized and deadly. The partnership represented two Marines whose training had been completely perverted for civilian torture and murder. Following his discharge from the Marines for theft, Ng met Leonard Lake and discovered they shared violent fantasies about controlling and torturing victims. Their combined Marine training provided them with the tactical knowledge and systematic thinking necessary to turn these fantasies into a horrific reality. The meeting of two Marine-trained individuals with criminal tendencies created one of America's most dangerous killing partnerships. Ng's role in establishing the Calaveras County compound showed clear influence from his Marine training in operational security and tactical planning. His military background provided additional expertise in weapons, surveillance, and systematic operations that enhanced their ability to capture, hold, and torture victims for extended periods. The compound demonstrated how multiple Marines working together could create exceptionally sophisticated criminal operations. The systematic torture methods employed by Ng showed direct application of Marine combat training to civilian victims who had no way to defend themselves against military-trained predators. His weapons expertise and tactical knowledge were used to terrorize and control victims during prolonged torture sessions. Each interaction with victims demonstrated how Marine training could be perverted for the most evil purposes. Ng participated in the systematic torture and murder of at least 11 confirmed victims, applying his Marine training to make their operation more efficient and deadly. His military background in operational procedures and systematic violence made him an exceptionally dangerous partner in their torture compound. Each murder showed how Marine training could enhance criminal capabilities when applied to civilian targets. The partnership between Lake and Ng demonstrated how multiple Marines with criminal tendencies could combine their training to create exceptionally sophisticated and dangerous criminal operations. Their systematic approach to victim selection, torture, and disposal showed clear military influence in operational planning and execution. The case highlighted the potential dangers when military training is applied to criminal enterprise by multiple service members working together. When Leonard Lake committed suicide in police custody in 1985, Ng fled to Canada, where he fought extradition for years using his Marine training to evade capture internationally. His systematic approach to avoiding accountability showed continued application of military operational thinking to criminal defense and evasion. Legal battles delayed justice for torture, murder victims, while Ng remained free in Canadian custody. Ng's flight to Canada and lengthy extradition fight demonstrated how Marine training in operational security and evasion could be applied to avoiding criminal prosecution. His systematic approach to legal defense and international law showed continued application of military strategic thinking to criminal defense. The extended legal proceedings denied victims' families timely justice for systematic torture and murder. After years of legal battles, Ng was finally extradited to California, where he faced trial for systematic torture murders that had shocked the nation. The Marine veteran was forced to confront evidence of his crimes, including videotapes of systematic torture sessions that documented his military-trained approach to civilian torture. His trial revealed how Marine training had enhanced their ability to commit and conceal systematic murder. During legal proceedings, evidence showed how Ng's Marine training had been systematically applied to civilian torture and murder over their 2-year operation. His weapons expertise, tactical knowledge, and operational planning skills had all been perverted for criminal purposes. The trial demonstrated how military training could make criminals more dangerous and their crimes more systematic and brutal. Charles Ng was convicted of 11 murders and sentenced to death for his role in the systematic torture operation that terrorized California. The Marine veteran received the ultimate punishment for systematically torturing and murdering innocent civilians. Justice was finally served for victims of military-trained torture, though the lengthy legal process had delayed accountability for decades. Ng currently remains on California's death row, where he continues to fight appeals while families of his victims wait for his execution. The Marine veteran has spent decades avoiding final accountability for his systematic torture and murder of innocent civilians. His continued appeals represent ongoing denial of full justice to families who have waited over 35 years for final resolution. The Charles Ng case represents how Marine training can be systematically applied to civilian torture and murder when combined with criminal partnerships. His military background provided skills that made the Lake Ng operation exceptionally dangerous and organized. The case highlighted the need for better screening and monitoring of military personnel to prevent future military-trained criminal partnerships. Case 3. Anthony Sowell. Anthony Soule served in the U.S. Marines with electrical systems training before returning to Cleveland, where he would become one of Ohio's most notorious serial killers. Born in 1959, Soule appeared to be a dedicated Marine who had served his country honorably during his military service. His fellow Marines and Cleveland neighbors never suspected that beneath his quiet demeanor lay a predator who would systematically target the city's most vulnerable women. Soule's Marine service provided him with electrical systems expertise and systematic operational thinking that would later influence his approach to systematic killing. His military training emphasized discipline, methodical procedures, and attention to detail that would be applied to victim selection and crime scene management. The organizational skills that made him an effective Marine would be perverted into tools for systematic murder and body disposal. Following his discharge from the Marines, Soule returned to Cleveland's Imperial Avenue, where he established himself in a neighborhood populated by society's most vulnerable individuals. His military background provided him with the discipline and systematic thinking that characterized his approach to selecting and killing victims. The transition from military service to civilian predator showed how combat training could be misapplied to targeting defenseless populations. Between 2007 and 2009, Soule systematically killed 11 confirmed victims, targeting African American women struggling with addiction and poverty in Cleveland's most neglected neighborhoods. His Marine training was evident in his methodical approach to victim selection, focusing on women who were unlikely to be immediately missed by authorities or family members. Each victim represented someone who trusted a Marine veteran who had completely betrayed his oath to protect American citizens. Soule's systematic stalking methods demonstrated clear influence from his Marine background in reconnaissance and intelligence-gathering techniques learned during military service. He would study potential victims and their routines, identifying vulnerabilities and opportunities for attack with military-style surveillance. His approach showed how legitimate military training in observation and target assessment could be perverted for civilian predation. The killer's methods showed systematic thinking learned through Marine service, as he developed consistent approaches to victim selection, killing, and body disposal. His military training in procedures and operational security was applied to avoiding detection while continuing his murder spree for over 2 years. Each murder demonstrated increasing sophistication as he refined his methods through military-style operational improvement. Soule's Imperial Avenue home became the center of his systematic killing operation, where he would bring victims before torturing and murdering them. His Marine training in logistics and operational planning was evident in how he managed multiple victims and crime scenes within his residential location. The house demonstrated how military organizational skills could be applied to creating sustainable killing operations in urban environments. The investigation into Soule's crimes was initially hampered by police attitudes toward his victim demographic, as reports of missing women from vulnerable populations received limited attention from authorities. Soule's military background helped him avoid detection for years while systematically killing women whose society had largely forgotten. His systematic approach to targeting marginalized victims showed how Marine training could be applied to exploiting societal weaknesses. Bodies were discovered throughout Soule's Cleveland home in various stages of decomposition, revealing the scope of his systematic killing operation that had continued for years. His Marine training in logistics and operational management was evident in how he had managed multiple crime scenes and victim disposal within his residential location. The discovery shocked investigators, who realized they were dealing with a Marine-trained systematic killer. The overwhelming smell emanating from Soule's property finally led to police investigation in 2009, exposing his systematic killing operation that had terrorized Cleveland's most vulnerable population. Authorities discovered 11 confirmed victims who had been systematically tortured and murdered by a Marine veteran who had perverted his military training. The scope of Marine-trained evil became apparent as investigators uncovered evidence of systematic torture and murder. Soule was arrested and charged with multiple murders, facing justice for his systematic killing spree that had terrorized Cleveland for over 2 years. The Marine veteran was forced to confront evidence of his crimes against society's most vulnerable women. His trial revealed how military training had enhanced his ability to systematically select, torture, and murder civilian victims while avoiding detection. During legal proceedings, evidence showed how Soule's Marine training had been systematically applied to civilian murder and body disposal over his 2-year killing spree. His systematic approach to victim selection and crime scene management demonstrated clear military influence in operational planning and execution. The trial highlighted how military training could make criminals more dangerous and their crimes more systematic. Anthony Sowell was convicted of 11 murders and sentenced to death for his systematic killing spree that had terrorized Cleveland's most vulnerable population. The Marine veteran received the ultimate punishment for systematically torturing and murdering innocent women who had trusted him. Justice was finally served for victims of military-trained, systematic murder, though the lengthy legal process had taken years. In 2021, Anthony Soule died of natural causes while on death row, never facing execution for his systematic torture and murder of 11 women. The Marine veteran's death denied full justice to victims' families, who had waited over a decade for his execution. His natural death represented the final betrayal of victims who deserved to see him face the ultimate consequences for his systematic crimes. The Anthony Soule case represents how Marine training can be systematically applied to targeting society's most vulnerable populations for torture and murder. His military background provided organizational skills and systematic thinking that made him an exceptionally dangerous predator. The case highlighted the need for better attention to crimes against marginalized populations and the potential dangers of military-trained criminals operating in urban environments. Case 4. Wayne Adam Ford. Wayne Adam Ford represented one of the most unusual cases in serial killer history. A Marine veteran who systematically murdered 4 women in California before walking into a sheriff's office with evidence of his crimes. Ford's military service provided him with the discipline and systematic thinking that characterized his approach to murder, but ultimately his conscience overcame his killing impulses in an unprecedented act of self-surrender. Ford's Marine training was evident in his organized approach to victim selection and murder during his 1997 to 1998 killing spree across California. His military background provided systematic thinking and operational planning that made him an efficient killer targeting vulnerable women throughout the state. Each murder showed increasing sophistication as he applied military-style operational improvement to civilian killing methods. The systematic nature of Ford's crimes demonstrated clear influence from his Marine service, as he developed consistent methods for selecting, killing, and disposing of victims across multiple California locations. His military training in procedures and logistics was applied to avoiding detection while continuing his murder spree. Ford's approach showed how Marine training could enhance criminal capabilities when systematically applied to civilian targets. Ford's victim selection process showed systematic thinking learned through Marine service, as he targeted women based on vulnerability and reduced likelihood of immediate police attention. His military training in intelligence gathering and target assessment was applied to identifying perfect victims for his killing operation. Each selection demonstrated methodical approaches that characterized his Marine service background. The killer's methods included systematic approaches to victim acquisition, murder, and body disposal that showed clear military influence in operational planning and execution. Ford's Marine training in tactical operations was perverted into civilian hunting and killing techniques. His systematic approach to crime scene management demonstrated how military organizational skills could be applied to criminal enterprise. During his killing spree, Ford maintained operational security through systematic evidence elimination and crime scene management, learned through Marine service. His military training in field operations and logistics was applied to concealing his crimes from law enforcement investigation. The systematic nature of his evidence disposal showed continued application of Marine operational procedures to criminal activity. In an unprecedented move that shocked law enforcement, Ford walked into the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office carrying a severed breast as evidence of his systematic murders. The Marine veteran's conscience finally overcame his killing impulses, leading to the most unusual surrender in serial killer history. His systematic approach to confession showed continued application of military organizational thinking, even in admitting his crimes. Ford's surrender represented the only known case of a serial killer voluntarily providing physical evidence of his crimes to law enforcement. The Marine veteran's decision to end his killing spree through self-surrender demonstrated that military conscience could ultimately overcome criminal impulses. His unprecedented confession provided investigators with immediate evidence and closure for victim families. During legal proceedings, Ford's systematic approach to murder was revealed through evidence spanning his one-year killing operation across California. His Marine training in documentation and operational planning was evident in the organized nature of his crimes. The prosecution demonstrated how military training had enhanced his criminal capabilities, while his surrender showed retained military honor. Wayne Adam Ford was convicted of 4 murders and sentenced to death for his systematic killing spree that had terrorized California. The Marine veteran received the ultimate punishment for systematically murdering innocent women, though his voluntary surrender represented unusual acknowledgement of guilt. Justice was served for victims of military-trained, systematic murder through his death sentence. Ford currently remains on California's death row, where he has been fighting appeals while families of his victims wait for his execution. The Marine veteran continues to face the consequences of his systematic crimes decades after his unprecedented surrender. His case highlighted how Marine training could be applied to systematic murder while raising questions about military psychological screening procedures. The Wayne Adam Ford case represents the most unusual example of how Marine training can be applied to systematic civilian murder followed by voluntary surrender. His military background provided organizational skills that made him an efficient killer, while retained military conscience ultimately led to his confession. The case demonstrated both the dangers and potential redemptive aspects of military training in criminal contexts. Case 5. Andrew Urdiales. Andrew Urdiales used his Marine training to conduct a decade-long killing spree across California and Illinois that demonstrated exceptional mobility and systematic planning capabilities. His military service provided him with the organizational skills and geographic mobility that enabled him to kill 8 confirmed victims between 1986 and 1996, while avoiding detection across multiple jurisdictions for years. Urdiales' Marine background was evident in his systematic approach to multi-state killing operations that exploited jurisdictional boundaries and geographic distance to avoid capture. His military training in mobility and operational planning allowed him to establish killing patterns in different states while maintaining operational security. Each murder showed how Marine training could be systematically applied to civilian killing across vast geographic areas. The extended timeline of Urdiales' crimes demonstrated how Marine discipline and systematic thinking could sustain killing operations for over a decade without detection. His military training in long-term operational planning was applied to maintaining his murder spree while avoiding capture by multiple law enforcement agencies. The case showed how Marine training could create exceptionally persistent and elusive killers. Urdiales' systematic victim selection process showed clear influence from his Marine training in target assessment and operational planning throughout his decade-long killing career. His military background provided skills in surveillance and intelligence gathering that he applied to identifying vulnerable victims across multiple states. Each murder demonstrated systematic thinking learned through Marine service applied to civilian predation. The killer's methods included systematic approaches to victim acquisition, murder, and interstate travel that showed clear military influence in operational mobility and planning. Urdiala's marine training in tactical operations and geographic mobility was perverted into multi-state civilian hunting and killing. His systematic approach to jurisdictional exploitation demonstrated how military mobility training could be applied to criminal enterprise. During his killing spree, Urdiales maintained operational security through systematic evidence elimination and multi-jurisdictional crime scene management learned through Marine service. His military training in field operations across different locations was applied to concealing his crimes from multiple law enforcement agencies. The systematic nature of his multi-state operations showed continued application of marine mobility procedures to criminal activity. The investigation into Urdiales' crimes was complicated by his systematic use of multiple jurisdictions and geographic distance to avoid establishing detectable patterns. His marine training in operational security and mobility made him exceptionally difficult for law enforcement to track across state lines. Multi-jurisdictional cooperation was required to identify connections between his systematic crimes. DNA evidence finally linked Urdiales to multiple murders across California and Illinois, ending his decade-long killing spree through scientific advancement and interagency cooperation. The Marine veteran was captured when forensic technology succeeded where traditional investigation had failed for years. His systematic approach to evidence elimination had been defeated by advances in genetic analysis and multi-jurisdictional cooperation. During legal proceedings, Urdiales' systematic approach to multi-state murder was revealed through evidence spanning his decade-long killing operation. His marine training in mobility and operational planning was evident in the organized nature of his crimes across multiple jurisdictions. The prosecution demonstrated how military training had enhanced his criminal capabilities across state boundaries. Andrew Urdiales was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to death for his systematic multi-state killing spree that had terrorized California and Illinois. The Marine veteran received the ultimate punishment for systematically murdering innocent women across multiple states. Justice was served for victims of military-trained systematic murder through his death sentence. In 2018, Andrew Urdiales committed suicide on California's death row before facing execution for his systematic multi-state killing spree. The Marine veteran chose death over facing the ultimate punishment for his decade-long murder operation. His suicide denied full justice to victims' families who had waited decades for accountability and final resolution. The Andrew Urdiales case represents how Marine training can be systematically applied to multi-state civilian murder operations that exploit jurisdictional boundaries. His military background provided mobility and organizational skills that made him an exceptionally elusive killer. The case highlighted the challenges of investigating military-trained criminals operating across multiple jurisdictions. Case 6, Darren Dion Van. Darren Dion Van conducted the longest killing career of any Marine-trained serial killer, systematically murdering 7 confirmed victims over a 15-year period from 1999 to 2014 in Indiana. His Marine service provided him with the discipline and systematic thinking that allowed him to maintain his killing operation while appearing to live a normal civilian life for over a decade. Van's Marine training was evident in his systematic approach to victim selection and murder that sustained his killing operation for over a decade and a half without detection. His military background provided organizational skills and operational security that allowed him to avoid capture while systematically targeting vulnerable women. Each murder showed how Marine discipline could be systematically applied to long-term criminal operations. The extended timeline of Van's crimes demonstrated exceptional operational security learned through Marine service, as he maintained his killing operation for 15 years while avoiding detection by authorities. His military training in systematic procedures and evidence management was applied to concealing his crimes from law enforcement investigation, The case showed how Marine training could create exceptionally elusive long-term killers. Van's systematic methods showed clear influence from his Marine background in operational planning and target selection throughout his 15-year killing career in Indiana. His military training provided skills in surveillance and victim assessment that he applied to identifying vulnerable targets. Each murder demonstrated continued application of Marine systematic thinking to civilian predation over an extended period. The killer's methods included systematic approaches to victim acquisition, murder, and long-term operational security that showed clear military influence in sustained criminal operations. Van's Marine training in tactical operations and systematic procedures was perverted into long-term civilian hunting and killing. His systematic approach to evidence management demonstrated how military organizational skills could be applied to sustained criminal enterprise. During his killing spree, Van maintained operational security through systematic evidence elimination and crime scene management learned through Marine service over 15 years. His military training in field operations and logistics was applied to concealing his crimes from law enforcement investigation. The systematic nature of his long-term operations showed continued application of Marine operational procedures to criminal activity. The investigation into Van's crimes was complicated by his systematic approach to operational security and evidence elimination that had sustained his killing operation for 15 years. His Marine training in systematic procedures and security made him exceptionally difficult for law enforcement to detect and track. Long-term operational discipline learned through military service was applied to avoiding criminal detection. GPS tracking and advanced investigative techniques finally led to Van's capture in 2014, ending his 15-year killing spree through technological advancement and modern surveillance methods. The Marine veteran was caught when modern tracking technology succeeded where traditional methods had failed for over a decade. His systematic approach to operational security had been defeated by advances in electronic tracking and investigation. During legal proceedings, Van's systematic approach to long-term murder was revealed through evidence spanning his 15-year killing operation across Indiana. His Marine training in systematic procedures and operational planning was evident in the organized nature of his sustained crimes. The prosecution demonstrated how military training had enhanced his criminal capabilities over an extended period. Darren Dion Van was convicted of 7 murders and sentenced to 7 life terms without parole, ensuring he will die in prison for his systematic killing career. The Marine veteran received multiple life sentences for his 15-year murder operation that had terrorized Indiana communities. Justice was finally served for victims of the longest Marine-trained killing spree in American history. Van currently serves his multiple life sentences in Indiana's prison system, where he will remain until his natural death for his systematic crimes. The Marine veteran faces the consequences of his 15-year killing operation, while families of his victims have finally received justice. His case represents the ultimate accountability for military-trained, systematic murder. The Darren Dion Van case represents how Marine training can be systematically applied to long-term civilian murder operations that span decades. His military background provided discipline and organizational skills that made him an exceptionally persistent killer. The case highlighted the challenges of detecting military-trained criminals operating with systematic long-term approaches to murder. 6 Marines who swore Semper Fidelis became America's most systematic predators, claiming over 50 confirmed lives across 3 decades of terror. Leonard Lake died by suicide in 1985 rather than face justice for his torture compound crimes. Charles Ng remains on California's death row for 11 torture murders committed with his Marine partner. Anthony Soule died in prison in 2021 while serving a death sentence for strangling 11 women in Cleveland. Wayne Adam Ford sits on death row after surrendering with evidence of his 4 California murders. Andrew Urdiales chose suicide on death row in 2018 rather than face execution for his decade-long killing spree. Darren Dion Van served 7 life sentences for his 15-year murder operation across Indiana. These men represent the ultimate betrayal of Marine honor, using military training designed to protect America to systematically hunt and kill innocent civilians. Their systematic approaches to victim selection, torture, and murder showed clear influence from Marine combat training and operational planning. Military discipline that should have defended American lives was perverted into methods for taking them with unprecedented efficiency and brutality. Which case shocked you the most? The Lake Ming torture compound that combined 2 Marines training for systematic civilian torture? Anthony Soul's systematic targeting of Cleveland's most vulnerable women over 2 years? Wayne Adam Ford's unprecedented surrender with physical evidence of his crimes? Andrew Urdialis's decade-long multi-state killing spree that exploited Marine mobility? Or Darren Dion Vaughn's 15-year murder operation that demonstrated exceptional operational security? Should the Marine Corps bear greater responsibility for psychological screening and ongoing monitoring of service members who show potential for violence? These 6 men completed their Marine service and received military training before beginning or continuing their systematic killing careers. Their cases raise uncomfortable questions about whether better screening could have identified their potential for civilian violence before they received combat training that enhanced their criminal capabilities. Do you believe Marine service actually created these systematic killers? Or did it simply attract individuals already predisposed to violence who then used their military experience to become more effective predators? The debate continues over whether military service transforms people into killers or merely provides tools that can be used for protection or destruction, depending on the individual's true character and moral foundation. The geographic impact of these Marine-trained killers stretched from California's remote compounds to Ohio's urban neighborhoods to Indiana's vulnerable populations, with no region safe from their systematic methods. California bore the heaviest burden, with 4 of the 6 killers operating within the state at various times during their careers. Their mobility and Marine training allowed them to spread terror across multiple jurisdictions while avoiding detection for years or decades. Over 50 confirmed victims lost their lives to these Marine-trained predators, though the actual number may be much higher when considering suspected cases and undiscovered victims. Each victim represents a life cut short by men who had sworn to protect American citizens from exactly these kinds of threats. Young women, families, vulnerable individuals, and society's most defenseless people became targets for predators who exploited the trust that Marine service typically commands in American communities. The timeline of terror spanned from 1983 to 2014, representing over 3 decades of systematic killing by Marine veterans who used their military training for evil against civilians. Some operated simultaneously in overlapping regions, creating waves of terror that law enforcement struggled to understand and combat effectively. Their systematic approaches and operational security made them particularly difficult to catch, investigate, and prosecute successfully. Justice eventually prevailed through death sentences, suicide, natural death, and life imprisonment, but not before these men had claimed dozens of innocent lives across multiple states. Some families waited decades for closure, watching appeals drag on while their loved ones' killers remained alive behind bars. The legal system's response showed that Marine service provides no immunity from the consequences of systematic evil and civilian murder. The broader questions raised by these cases continue to challenge Marine leadership and criminal justice professionals nationwide. How can the Marine Corps better identify individuals with violent tendencies during recruitment and service? What role does military combat training play in enhancing criminal capabilities? How do we balance the need for effective Marine training with the risk of creating more dangerous criminals? The investigation challenges faced by law enforcement highlighted how Marine training made these killers particularly elusive and dangerous to communities. Multi-jurisdictional cases were complicated by military mobility, that allowed killers to operate across state lines with ease. Systematic approaches to evidence elimination and crime scene management, learned through military service, extended investigations for years or decades while killers remained free. These cases demonstrate that military service, while honorable for the vast majority who serve with distinction, can attract or enhance individuals with predatory instincts towards civilian populations. The systematic thinking, operational planning, and geographic mobility provided by Marine training created some of America's most prolific and elusive serial killers in modern history. The victim impact extends far beyond the confirmed death toll, affecting families, communities, and public trust in military institutions across the nation. Survivors and families still deal with trauma caused by men who should have been protectors rather than predators of innocent civilians. The betrayal of Marine honor created lasting damage to communities across multiple states and decades. This has been Savage Case Files, examining how Marine service can mask the most dangerous predators in American society. Subscribe for more investigations into the darkest betrayals of military trust and the relentless pursuit of justice. Hit the notification bell to never miss our examinations of systematic evil that shocked the nation and betrayed military honor. 6 men who chose murder over Marine honor, death over duty to protect American civilians. Their Marine training made them more dangerous killers, but ultimately couldn't save them from facing justice for their systematic crimes against the innocent Americans they had sworn to protect with their lives.